Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this coffee break. This coffee break is a part of a series for BHAM Knows Data, which is a month-long initiative focusing on increasing the data literacy skills of Birmingham's workforce. So speaking of Birmingham, we have two of Birmingham's best that are having a conversation today that we get to listen in on. We have Josh Jones, who is VP of Market Innovation at eSource. Josh is at his core an innovator and has led multiple companies over the past 20 years that have leveraged data science and AI to build game-changing innovations across the enterprise. And then we have Daniel Coleman, a Birmingham resident with more than 3 decades of experience in finance. He became president of the Birmingham Southern College in December of 2018. And before that, he was CEO of the global services firm KCG Holdings. And then it sold in 2017 before he became president. So these two are going to talk about mostly Daniel's experience as president of Birmingham Southern College and where he sees data skills fitting in to this new economy, this new workforce, this new world. He has some really interesting insights about where things are headed, and I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation.
All right, Daniel, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about data and data literacy.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Josh.
So let's go ahead and jump in and let's talk about, I think one of the questions that's most fascinating to me when I think about your role is curriculum. And how do you build and maintain a curriculum that keeps up with skills changing the way they are, with the demands constantly revising? How do you go about doing that, and how do you make sure that it stays relevant?
Right, that's a great question. We're a liberal arts college, so generally speaking, a lot of our coursework and a lot of the way we think about educating students is very traditional. And yet the liberal arts has changed. In 1856, when we started, I imagine the curriculum was pretty much Greek and Latin, and not a lot of social sciences and other things that we very much consider the liberal arts. So when I think about the curriculum and the ideals behind the liberal arts, I think about how can we teach young people or students to think critically, to be able to look at evidence based on analysis of things they've learned and learn how to do things and come up with their own conclusions. That's really what's behind the liberal arts. And so then the question is, well, how do we make sure we do that with every generation? What changes so that ultimate mission can be met? And so when we think about curriculum here, sure, we think about, teaching Shakespeare and things like that connect us to generations of study, but also teaching Shakespeare in a way that we learn how to think critically and learn a lot of the ideas in Shakespearean plays. But we don't just teach Shakespeare. We will teach various types of, obviously, math and science, but in the social sciences in particular, which weren't nearly as developed 150 years ago. There's a lot there where we're actually applying knowledge and applying things we've learned over the last 50 to 100 years to challenge ourselves on things we think maybe have been a certain way and maybe turn out not to be that way. So our challenge is to come up with a curriculum that is relevant to today's world and preferably connects us to previous worlds, but it's relevant to today's world so that we can teach critical thinking like liberal arts colleges have always done.
Gotcha. And sort of along those lines, as you talk about some of the balance, how do you think about balancing your tactical skills versus the holistic education when it comes to the students' experience there and the requirements that you guys set for them?
That's a great question. When I graduated college in 1986, I was an English major, and I was able to translate that to a business career. And in fact, I left college with a degree in literature and became a trader in the trading pits. I was able to do that. It was a little bumpy start for a year, but afterwards I felt like I was reasonably well prepared because it was really about learning how to learn. And over time, my competitors who've gone to MIT or Wharton, they were really well prepared for that first year. But after that, I felt like they did not learn how to learn as well as I had. And I was, for that reason, very grateful for my liberal arts education. And I think that was a very important way for me, that was very important, and it's one of the reasons why I appreciate liberal arts.
Mhm.
Now, today, if I graduated with an English degree and I wanted to do the exact same thing I did before, I wouldn't be hired because in 1986, I couldn't program a computer. And that is a prerequisite for many jobs, being able to program. You don't have to be a computer scientist. You don't have to be the developer a company or an organization uses, but you need to be able to understand the language of programming. You need to be able to communicate in it, and you need to be able to express your thoughts in it. And so I think when I think about programming per se, I think it's tactical. I think it's something you absolutely really need to do for this job market and probably the job market going forward, not unlike communication, writing, and other things that perhaps 100 years ago or 50 years ago, typing was considered a really important skill and a lot of schools required it. So I think the tactical is what gives you access and what enables you to get that first job, enables you to pursue an academic career, just things you need to know. So we have to provide that or our students will never get to that next level. Once they're in that next level, it is all about the education that teaches them to learn and learn how to learn and continue learning throughout their career.
Yeah, it seems like really, particularly in the last decade, to your point, everything is really digitizing, and everything that we used to do in an analog fashion is it seems to be changing, and just communications, particularly with the social media, the way that the news is delivered, the way that people really hear what's going on around the world is dramatically changing. So, are you seeing that from your focus point getting fused more and more in terms of what you're training your students? You talk about the need to be able to program. Is that, it sounds like you're saying that's more converging with the curriculum that you guys are delivering today?
I think it will over time. We have to have a minimal tactical education so that our students will succeed. But I think if I just look at my own career, when I started as a trader in the trading pits, that was about as analog as it got. It was not digital. 15 years into my career, I worked with a team to start digitizing that, to start automating that with computer scientists and what we called then quants. I think they'd be called data scientists. And that was around the year 2000. And by 2010, I'd say 70% of the stocks traded in the New York Stock Exchange were traded in a computerized way, and probably more than that now. My point is, I witnessed this happen in the career, my 30-year career in finance. I witnessed a huge change due to technology and due to technology enabling people to leverage data that really was not leverageable before. And I saw that, and I think finance was probably ahead of the curve for various reasons. But since I left finance about 3 years ago, I'm beginning to witness that in so many different businesses as well as in the academy itself.
So where do you see things going? What does the future look like, and how are you investing accordingly? It sounds like you're saying this isn't a fad, that perhaps some of these changes are permanent. Vision cast for a minute. Where do you see things headed?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about investing, then I'll talk about vision. When I left finance a few years ago, I started investing in local companies, and then I became president of Birmingham Southern, so I'm not actively looking for new companies to invest in, but I am very active in my current investments. And generally speaking, when I look at investing, I look at companies that are onto something that's growing, that's new, but also using technology to transform whatever market it is. Because my experience, my career was based on using technology to transform how people buy and sell financial assets. That's really what I did for 20 of my 30 years. And I'm trying to apply that to other areas, whether it's in life sciences or whether it's in financial services or whatever opportunities are available, where I see technology is going to take a business in a way that is scalable, but wasn't scalable before. When I think about the world today, and I think about academics in particular, and I think about my own career and life, so much has happened in the last 20 years with respect to technology. And I think the question we have is, what does it mean, and what are we really getting from it over the next 50 to 100 years or more? And I talk to people about this all the time, and I think about this a lot. And I think a good analogy and good analogies are always helpful, but a good analogy is Gutenberg and the printing press in 1440 in Mainz, Germany. So at that time, I'd say about 7% of Germans, maybe fewer, could read. And there was really no reason to read because there were like no books around. And in particular, where religion was so important, if you wanted to learn about God and religion, you really went to the cathedral and you looked at the stained glass windows, you looked at the statuary, and maybe you learned through the rituals that the priests conducted, but you didn't read the Bible because you couldn't read and there weren't very many of them around. And so by 1500, 60 years later, there was probably 15 to 20 million books in Western Europe. And by 1517, or by 1500 or so, I'd say the literacy rate, from what I read, was about 2.5 times greater than it was just 50 years before. And by 1517, Martin Luther put his theses on the door of All Saints Church. And what that means is, not only, you had this huge technological change, but no one knew what to do with it because no one could read. And so only after people began to read and books became available did that knowledge kind of go directly to the people that wasn't available to them before. And with that, you had real change where Martin Luther decided from his version of Christianity, he could go straight to God. He didn't need all the other things that the church was providing him. And it was sole fide, I think, or faith alone. And so it not only did you have a technological change, but you had a skill set change, and then you had real change. So, but it took 75 years. So I think about today, I think, when I grew up, no one had computers, right? And then in the 80s, people started getting personal computers. But when I think about the real changes that happened, and again, go back to my career, I think one of the most important things was parallel processing, which made computational power cheap, available to people. And so in the late 90s, people started stacking servers on top of each other in a way that was, you could create a supercomputer, which cost $1.5 million for like 25,000. And that's exactly what we did when I put this group together to trade stocks in 1999 and 2000. And if we couldn't have stacked servers, if we had to use a supercomputer, we couldn't have done it. Moreover, I don't even think the internet would exist if you didn't have parallel processing. So that was a big deal, and I didn't know it at the time. But looking back on it, that was a really, really big deal. Go out 10 years. Really big deal around 2010, I realized as I saw other companies start up overnight, that how do they do that? How are they able to store data like that? How are they able to do all these things that are so expensive? Well, guess what? They did it in the cloud. Our ability to sell or rent excess capacity in the cloud is really transformational. And what it's done for us is enabled to accumulate huge amounts of data that for almost nothing. And so now I can't remember where I read this, but the human race is like doubling its data every 4 years in quantity, probably not in quality, but in quantity. And part of that's because of the cloud. So now we have all this data and we have processing power that helps us deal with it. What's going to happen in the next 10 years? And my future vision, my guess is the computational power is going to get a lot stronger with quantum computing. And if that comes through, and the US government just put together its own quantum computing effort because they think it's so important, if that comes through, our ability to process and do things with data could go 1 million times faster. So I see all these technological changes that are like the printing press of our time, like just giving us access to things that we didn't have access before. In that time it was books, and now it's data. But the question is, can we read? And who can read? And guess what? I bet Germany's 99% literate today. The thing is, we have all this data, but we need data literacy to make anything out of the information. And so when I think about today, it's not a gimmick. This is a secular trend, and it's just going to go faster and harder. And what data has done for us, it's allowed us to use statistical models that we couldn't use before because we didn't have enough data. And with these models, we can learn so much through probability and inference that we can never learn before. So I think about this all the time, and I get excited about it, but also get concerned about it. So as a college president, my job is to figure out how can we make sure that we have the literacy in our students here so they can leverage the tools of the 21st century for liberal arts education.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. As you're talking about that, as having served many years as a data science consultant, I've worked with a lot of large organizations that realize, okay, there's sort of a data arms race, and everybody realizes, like you said, the amount of data is just exploding. And so everyone is asking this question, what can we do with it? Like, how do we leverage this? And as time goes on, you're seeing more and more use cases of ways to reduce scrap rates, ways to reduce cost, increase customer satisfaction, really target your message to an audience of one. But you're also seeing the advance of data science tools, whereas a couple of years ago, data science was only in the realm of data scientists. But now more and more, you've got citizen data scientists and really everyone in the organization saying, we have all this data that used to be in a server somewhere, but now it's in a data mart, and I can actually hook up a Power BI dashboard and start exploring it myself, and I'm not even in the data science team. So you're definitely seeing a democratization occur in the workplace. The data is there increasingly, and I think there's so many companies right now saying, okay, we've got all this data, what do we do with it? And so the opportunity, to your point, is it's incredibly ripe right now. So yeah, definitely echo the need for people to really upskill on their data literacy.
I think there are two types of data literacy. You can get a master's or PhD in data science, and you can kind of take it to the next level, which is great. It's almost like you're the person writing the books in medieval Germany. You're taking advantage of the printing press, but you're actually doing the writing. But they're the people reading the books, and they'll be the people using the data. And they don't need masters and PhDs. But they do need training, and they do need basic understanding of things like Python and R. They need basic statistical understanding. But there's all this out there for them. And these people are going to be in every type of business, nonprofit, college, everywhere, because this resource is there now that wasn't there before.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Daniel and Josh, for that great conversation. I particularly loved the analogy of the printing press and just how that translates to the technology we have today, and asking that question, well, who can read? And so that's exactly what we're asking and answering through this data literacy initiative this month. We would love for you guys to participate. If you are in a position where you want to improve your data literacy skills, which that's me, that's most of us, go to bhamknowsdata.com. You'll be able to take the data literacy assessment and hop right into some upskilling opportunities to improve your data literacy. So you take the test just to get a feel for where you stand, and then you jump into these upskilling activities, these learning activities, so that you can actually improve. We're really excited to be just pushing this initiative forward this month. Quant Hub, Innovate Birmingham, Tech Birmingham, Birmingham Business Alliance, Think Data Solutions. We have so many great partners helping pull this off. We really hope that you guys will go to bhamknowsdata.com and get started.